Charlie Beckett, I'm director of the JournalismAI project. Sorry I couldn't be with you this morning. Shepo says it went all right. Do we believe him? Yeah. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you, but I was actually teaching. This is my day job, is at the LSE, is teaching. And some of my students are here. Hello, guys. What were we teaching today? AI in journalism. So I've had 4 hours of this already, you know, and some fantastic feedback from basically the intelligent next generation of people who are going to be using and deploying AI. So that was really interesting. And now we turn to this last panel, at least. We've got the quiz afterwards. And I'm really, really pleased to have these 4 wonderful people with me. Irene J. Liu, who's from the International Fund for Public Interest Media in the States. No challenge there. I've got Ezra Eeman, who's the Director of Strategy and Innovation at NPO, which is not the Belgian, it's the Netherlands Public Service Broadcasting Organisation. We have Jane Barrett on the end, Head of AI Strategy at Reuters, and in the middle, Agnes Stenbom, who very kindly is still in maternity leave, but has agreed to join us, which is wonderful. Really old friendly participant. And if you need cheering up, ask to see pictures of the boy, an absolutely adorable child. Agnes is head of the In Lab at Schibsted, and she's also on the Tinius Trust, which is the governing body, isn't it, of Schibsted, right?
The owner, yes.
Yeah. So, we are going to tell you all what's going to happen with AI in journalism in the next year or 2, aren't we? Right, I'd like to start, exactly with that question. I'll start with you, Jane, if I may. What is happening next for Reuters and AI next year or so?
So firstly, thank you very much for having me, and thank you, Charlie, for getting me into this AI world. In 2020, he called me up and said, you're doing nothing else, it's COVID time, so you may as well get involved in journalism AI. And so I did, and hey, it's parlayed into the next phase of my career, and I had the pleasure of being on a team with Agnes doing a journalism AI project during COVID, which was fantastic. So in terms of where we're going next, I'll just give you a very brief kind of view of where we've come from. So we started building AI tools for the newsroom last year, and we really focused on the tools that if we could get those workflows cracked, then it would impact the biggest number of people. And that's kind of where we focused our attention from the centre. But at the same time, we've had amazing uptake amongst the journalists in the newsroom who have been using the tools that we've made available to them through our sandbox to actually create solutions themselves to their own problems, their own workflow issues. So we really want to keep that going and build on that, really increase that kind of the self-serve nature of solving problems, because goodness knows journalists always have lots of problems in the newsroom. But where we're focusing our attention now is we've really we've focused in the past on the breaking news part of the file. So how do we alert things? How do we start drafting stories? How do we translate? How do we package? How do we deal with video? And we're ready to move some of those into business as usual now. So we're trying to work out, what does business as usual look like in a world of AI? You have a very different way of having to do ongoing evaluation, ongoing testing, model changes coming in, models drifting, prompts drifting, new techniques and the like. So what does BAU look like in an AI world for some of those pieces? And then Reuters as a whole, in fact Thomson Reuters as a whole, is moving into a space that we call reimagine, which is essentially that. It's like, how do we reimagine all of our work that we do for every single team, every single person, because we now have these extraordinary AI tools in our hands? What does that mean for the way that our teams are shaped, for the tools that we have, for the processes that we want to rethink? What are the really core things that we do every day? How much of it is just process that we've been doing in the past? And how can we really rethink? So within that broader scope, within the newsroom specifically, we're looking very much at the... Thank you very much. So within the newsroom in particular, we're looking at how to continue to speed up the breaking news side of things. That's obviously kind of a very core thing for Reuters. But then also really thinking about how can we make our tools not be the thing that stands in the way of our teams working as one. We have an overall project within the newsroom called One Newsroom, continuing to take down the barriers between text journalists, video journalists, photographers, etc. And a big part of the blocker of that has been technology and the tools that we're using. So how can we use AI now to create much simpler systems that if you're a specialist in text, you can still edit a video. For a specialist in video, you can still produce lots of text. So again, as I kind of can regularly say, AI isn't our strategy. AI fits into our strategy to serve our strategy. So as we look at speeding up our breaking news, making our teams work as a single team in one newsroom, and as we look at reimagining all of our work across Thomson Reuters, AI is going to fit into and be a main driver of all three of those.
That's great. Thanks very much. I like the idea that you're talking about simplifying. We always think of AI as kind of complex, and yet this idea that you're actually trying to simplify the actual adaptation. Ezra, you've been at NPO for enough time now to and you haven't left, and you're just enough time to get a sense of where those organisations that you work with are at. Where would you like to see them going?
I think to understand the Dutch public broadcasting kind of landscape, you have to know that there's an umbrella organization, and underneath are different independent organizations that all have their own workflows, and we sit kind of across with a vision for innovation. And we've done quite a lot of projects with them. I would say there's 50 projects at this moment running, experiments. What we'd like to do is actually join up a bit more, connecting the dots. We have a huge work still to do to really have one unified data flow and metadata flow, to kind of build on top of that, have a good vectorized kind of spectrum across all the data that we have, our audio data, our video data, our text, because we have both radio, television, and online newsrooms. And so fixing the basics is still something that we have to do, although we have so many impressive innovation experiments. And there's three priorities that we have in mind there. And first of all, it's really how can we increase relevant reach? Currently, we're kind of super serving our audience, and that's an older audience that we're already serving. How can AI actually help us reach those audiences that we're currently not reaching by kind of rethinking the formats, rethinking the storytelling, rethinking how we can actually have more interactive content. A second thing that we're trying to do is really improve the experience within our services. That goes from personalization, having a really more relevant offer, but also making sure it's more accessible. Because I really think there's a lot to be gained with AI in terms of providing a lower barrier into our services. And that's something that we, and of course there's a third bucket which I have to look at because there's huge cuts. It's really improving the efficiency, and we kind of frame it as adding value more efficiently, so that we really put that value thing still there. It's not just about cutting costs, but it's how can we make that value that we're trying to add in a more efficient way. So there's still a lot to be done, from going from single experiments that really work well in one organization, that's something that works across 13 organizations on a scaled way. So.
And anybody that knows NPO knows that it has this intriguing structure, this pluralistic structure. And you talked about 50 different projects. What's the secret of trying to make that cohere? Or is it that you don't want to? You want them to retain their individuality?
We believe very much that certainly in something that's so new and immature as AI that you really have to, that things need to start ground up and that you need to explore things. And then from there, we see which things can scale. So we have anything from AI assistant content moderation to radio to podcast flows to visual search in certain programs, which is very interesting. Is we do a visual analysis of our talk shows, and we combine that with audience data to see at which points the audience actually engages and at which points they actually leave the talk shows. We do that with one organization and one set of talk shows. If that works, then we see how we can scale it across the 13 organizations that are part of the Umbrella Club. So I kind of believe in the fact that you need to prototype and directly go into action and then see how you scale it. I guess we do it also because we don't have yet that superstructure to build on top of. So.
Yeah. Agnes, obviously you've had, what do you call this, the last few months off, haha, but at least that's given you a chance to sort of get a breath and perhaps stand away from it all in a way. What are you looking forward to when you go back to work? What do you think is next on your list, your to-do list? Or Schibsted's to-do list?
Yeah, I've spent the past year as this weird thing that we call users. And it's been fantastic stepping out for a bit. But stepping in again, I'm very excited to join my colleagues in exploring possible futures. And that's something that I think we've seen this past year, but especially in the past few months, becoming more and more structured. The work that news organizations are now engaging with in terms of accepting the fact that what we have offered in the past is probably not going to be the thing that we offer in the future. So how do we turn that into a strategic opportunity for us? And more importantly, how do we create value for people, for users in that future? So I'm excited to join colleagues in Schibsted, in the industry, in exploring what that can be. At InLab, the team that I manage at Schibsted, we work exclusively with speculative design and futures thinking. And one thing that's stood out throughout the years of running InLab is how the young people that we work with, we frame them as news outsiders, people who have a, let's say, not very positive relationship to news media like ours. What they request from us is more two-way experiences, media less as a piece of content and more as a trusted infrastructure, a place where you can turn for verified information. And that's the thing that I'm most excited about getting back to working on. How do we figure out the ways that that infrastructure looks like when the content isn't the value, but the infrastructure?
And how does AI fit into that? Because again, it's interesting talking with my students, for example, where there is a full understanding of the facility of AI and the utility of it and so on, but also quite a skepticism from their own personal engagement with it, especially from a young people's perspective. How do you use AI without losing, their confidence in what you're doing?
In so many ways. It's when you look at the usage data that OpenAI finally released about how people are using ChatGPT, for example, you can see that people turn to those services for practical advice. And news is largely practical advice. It's information that you need to practically live. And I think that's also how we're trying to build, for example, chatbots, editorial chatbots. We're trying to make news a practical value that you can engage with. So we've seen lots of really successful work with chatbots in Schibsted. VG and Aftonbladet have done really exciting things where the only content that you can access through those chatbots is editorial, verified information. Building or tapping into that user behavior of using chatbots for verified practical information. So I think that's one of the ways. We're doing lots of content versioning, for example, doing automated workflows for video production. So lots of exciting ways that we can do it.
Irene, obviously, don't have to tell you that it's a tough time for public service media everywhere, frankly, and perhaps you're feeling some pain in the States. But we've had some wonderful people here from NPR and from Cal Matters and so on, doing some great work. How can you keep things moving on the AI front at such a difficult time?
Yeah, so I think that it's quite interesting. What I love about this gathering is all of the innovation, and it gets my data journalist roots going, where I'm like, there's so much potential with the technology. I'll say that now with the organization that I work with, which is the International Fund for Public Interest Media, we are a multilateral fund based in Paris, an international organization, and our focus is on essentially trying to bundle money, resources, and deploy it to journalism organizations, to media focused in the global majority. So low and middle income countries in the global south as well as Eastern Europe. And the truth is that sustainability of media has been on the rocks for basically probably everyone's career in here, right? It's been a really huge struggle. AI is accelerating this because of the fact that social media platforms have downgraded news. They don't surface it. They don't link to it. Search engines are now essentially taking journalistic content, summarizing it, and so referrals are down. In many of the markets that we are working in Brazil, in South Africa, in Indonesia, we are hearing from publishers, large publishers, that their traffic is down 50 to 60% in the past year. This is critical because the business model that was already teetering because of digital ads do not make as much money as print ads is now going to face a complete cratering. So I think where we're sitting now, we are looking now more at the systems issues, right? Because how do you think about things like licensing? How do you think about the choices that individual news organizations need to make about how their content is used by these platforms? And how do you address the asymmetry of power when it comes to negotiation, and the fact that the money isn't there yet. I think that, to me, what drives a lot of the work that my team is doing within IFPIM is looking at sort of the confluence of kind of regulation, policy, investment, as well as innovation. And and I have the benefit of, quite frankly, not having to worry about the survival of one media organization. We have the benefit of being able to look at the ecosystem. And one thing I will say is I actually think that there is an opportunity and hope. We're at a moment, what they say about when you have big life changes, that your habits break, and suddenly you could start buying from a new store. Like, marketers really like these very kind of traumatic / chaotic moments like marriage and child and buying houses and things like that. We're at that moment now. People are starting to use different platforms. And I think that whereas in the past, we were stuck on crappy social media platforms because our friends and family were there. It wasn't serving us, it wasn't a great product, but we were there because our family and friends are there. I think that this new way that we're going to access information is going to be more akin to ride-hailing apps or e-commerce. How many times have you looked at Uber, Bolt, and some other thing and hit all of the apps to see which one was the cheapest and then cancel the other ones, right? That's going to be where we're at, I think, in the future. So if we, as an industry, as the news industry, can work together, collaborate, think as a collective, and focus on the values of culture, knowledge, narrative, language in our advocacy for policy, that there's an opportunity.
Yeah. And I mean, as you know, the Innovation Challenge this year and certainly next year has been focusing in on that sort of sustainability. And I know that your organisation has always had that approach, frankly. There's no point having a wonderful mission if you can't deliver. What do you think, though, the role, obviously you talked about the wider landscape, but in terms of the actual AI tools and systems, do you see them having efficiency impacts? Do you see them having an impact on, generation of editorial content that is being used?
Yes, I mean, I think that we're seeing amazing innovation in these spaces, right? There's I can't remember the name of the organization that was doing coverage, I think, in the Venezuelan election, and they created an avatar, an AI-driven avatar, because
that way that person couldn't be persecuted.
Yeah.
You know, like it's incredible, right? And I apologize if the person who invented that is in this room that I don't remember the name of your organization. But I think that there's, you know, technology has a way of actually being a tool for all the good things, free expression, you know, bypassing, you know, authoritarian powers and others. It also can be a tool of, you know, kind of the negatives of society as well, of course. But I think efficiency, to me, a really big opportunity actually is in pluralism of media.
Right.
Imagine that people don't actually have to be, you know, college-educated writers anymore, but maybe they just know their communities really well and are really, really good snoops and can actually just get the news and get information. Like, can we break the, you know, traditional elite power barriers that we see in legacy media? I think, Agnes, you mentioned the fact that young people, you know, not to generalize, but, you know, don't necessarily feel that legacy media resonates with them. Like, they want authenticity, they want different voices, they want, you know, a two-way engagement. All of these tools can be hugely powerful in that. However, I actually am very encouraged that people are skeptical about these technologies because they still really, really don't work well unless we collectively can kind of like, you know, keep those technologies accountable, use them responsibly, and also just, you know, do the kind of due diligence and the reporting against these technologies to stress test them that we need to and probably didn't do enough of in Web 2 and whatever came before.
And I like your point about the sort of the ability to do it in a completely different way that can work in one community and not in another. I mean, one of the teams working with us in the Innovation Challenge was finished is they used an avatar. And at a lot of organizations, if you tell journalists we're going to use an avatar, they will, you know, they will be very upset and they will see that as kind of ethical problem. This was a Ukrainian news organization that created an avatar of one of their correspondents. And why did they do it? Because he'd been mobilized. So this was a fantastic way for them to keep him, as it were, in the newsroom. Jane, broadening a bit wider, not trying to be too negative, but thinking about kind of obstacles going forward, and feel free. I mean, are we talking about those larger obstacles? Irene mentioned big issues around, you know, regulation and copyright and IP and all that kind of thing. Or is it still fundamentally, do you see it as an organizational obstacles that you've got to overcome?
Oh no, I mean, I think it's the massive ecosystem. I mean, as we've been saying, it's a massive moment of change. And inevitably, in massive moments of change, those with the money run fastest, and those with the ethics run slowest. You know, and you kind of look at some of the regulation, even just in the last week, some of the debate around is the EU AI Act actually slowing down innovation in this region, and should it be altered? So I think that you have to keep your eyes open, kind of 360 degrees at the moment in terms of kind of where are the issues. But I think from my point of view, I'm thinking about things in three main buckets. Those of you who are in Paris have heard this before, but people, tools, and structure. So I think one of the barriers is actually on the people side. You know, moments of change are really messy because change is always about humans, and humans feel tired, or they've got a headache, or they're a bit scared, or they can't be bothered today, or they're cynical because they're journalists, whatever it is. And so, you know, a huge piece of work still needs to be done, even though we're in 2025, 3 years in, post ChatGPT 5 coming, so GPT 3.5 rather coming out. But literacy and skilling people is still kind of a massive thing. What we're seeing at Reuters, and we did a bit of research about a month and a half ago, and what you see is that the people who are really leaning into the tools are accelerating at a much, much faster pace than those who are just dabbling. So you're seeing this skills gap opening up of the people who are really getting involved and are seeing AI as a kind of constant companion, and those who are kind of moderate or even zero kind of users. So I think there's that as one potential challenge is the people bit, and how do we bring along people in what is a technological, but it's also societal and human revolution. On the tool side, you know, you wake up every morning and think, okay, what's it going to be today? You know, I open my LinkedIn and I dread Ezra's next post of what's happened overnight. So just keeping up with what's out there, you know, and you know, it feels like a big part of my job at the moment is people coming to me saying, oh, can we get access to this tool? Or in my role, I need this tool. How do I get access? And you're just kind of, you know, working out what are you going to spend the money on? You know, these companies all need to start building revenue. They're not cheap tools if you're going to roll them out at enterprise level. So, you know, making smart decisions about which tools go where, to whom, what are the problems you're trying to solve, what's the right hammer to crack that particular nut. And then kind of that bigger piece is that sort of structure piece, and that's where, you know, the fair compensation for use of our content comes in. It's where licensing comes in. It's how we all work together as publishers, together with tech companies, to work out what does the future look like. How do we balance out supply and demand of content? I love what Agnes was just saying about content versus infrastructure. What is the future infrastructure for this next generation? For those of you who are skeptical, I love your skepticism, I share it. So therefore, like, how can we as publishers actually make a better, more healthy experience and actually kind of own some of that future? But I think one of the problems is that we're running around chasing our tails every single day, and we don't think enough about the audiences and how audiences work. You know, it's why being on a panel with these brilliant people is always so great, because, you know, they're friends outside of a panel as well, and so like being able to share ideas and challenge each other and really thinking about why are we actually doing all of this. So I think that blocker of this big structural things, keeping up with the regulation, keeping up with the commercials, keeping up with the changing audiences, is a really important bit of the business that if you get too busy in the day-to-day and you miss that bit, that could come and bite you later on.
Yeah, Ezra, as Jane says, you have a wonderful newsletter called Wayfinder, which I recommend. If you're not following it, follow it. But I'm like Jane. I dread when you post that.
We love you, though.
We love you. Just because you think, oh, God, it's a whole nother scenario. Yeah. I mean, it's all right for you guys. I'm writing a book about this. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. Redraft that, the text again. But you are very focused. I know you've got the real job of taking MPO forward, but you're also thinking a lot about where that path is headed. It's a broad question, but how confident are you that we're moving at the right pace that Jane says we should be at?
Well, I'm of course biased because I come to these events where everybody's clearly focused on trying to use AI. I think that might bias us a bit in terms of we're not seeing those who are not moving. I'm also not 100% convinced that we're focusing on the right problem. We're very much looking at how do we add AI to our existing organizations to optimize our existing flows, to add intelligence to it. While the bigger play that's happening is, of course, is media is being added to AI. And we're becoming part of AI systems. And how do you manage how do you remain visible in that system? But also, do you want to be in that system? We did a research with EBU and the BBC, which was referenced here, which made very clear that the accuracy level of these systems is not up to par of what the public broadcasters would expect. And more even, the audience actually expects us that we're accurate in these systems that we don't control. Yeah. So we're getting blamed for being inaccurate in a system that actually synthesizes our information. There is no link anymore between the content that you see there and the context in which it was created, the editorial intent, the judgment. So I really like, and I see Sanuta there at the back of the room, who's thinking about how can you infuse some of that editorial thinking, the mindset, in the output that goes into the machine so you can restructure it. And I think we really have to think more about how do we survive as media in AI rather than just adding AI to media.
Yeah, and Agnes, I suppose in a sense, sort of, you've had this time to reflect a little bit. I was talking to a Norwegian friend the other day about the crisis in journalism, and he said, Charlie, that's a very Anglo-Saxon point of view. Here in the Nordics, we are actually not comfortable, but we still feel that we have a lot of public support, that we have reasonable resources, that we are not panicking yet. How much should they be worried about their future?
a scale from 1 to 10. No, I think everybody in journalism shouldn't be worried, but we should be actively pursuing a positive future in this. When you said, do we want to be in the future of AI, in the AI landscape, that's not a choice that we have.
No.
The information landscape has changed. The information coming at individual users is now very different from what it has been in the past. So the question isn't, do we want to play where there's AI companies, but rather, how do we play in that place? And I just want to tap into what you said with survival, because I've heard it so many times, partly here, but at conferences and in articles everywhere. We talk about journalism surviving or journalism possibly dying or being killed. We're using this language as if there's this natural process where we just somehow die. What if we use the language that instead focuses on what happens if we fail? What happens if we don't catch this opportunity that's now right in front of us to reimagine what we could be, how we create value? So I think we should be worried, not about dying, but about failing. And I think one of the paths towards failure that I see a lot of media companies taking, including companies in the Nordics, is towards efficiency. I think of it almost as the efficiency illusion. We feel as if we're doing tons. We feel like we're running at high speed. We have this obsession with things happening at a high pace. But what if we're just moving at the same place? We're running in parallel, not forward, towards this other future that we know that we need to go to. It's so easy to confuse tempo, speed, with progress. And they're not the same. Optimizing for more efficient workflows in a model that is fundamentally broken or has to change is not a path that I would suggest any media company takes.
Excellent. Irene, sorry, in a second I'll come to you for questions, so get ready with some brilliant, pithy, concise questions. But before I do that, Irene, there was the Thomson Reuters report, wasn't there? I think it was last year, which did a survey of global majority journalists. And part of it was really interesting. It was something like, I can't remember the figures, one of my students will tell me, but it was something like 70, 80% said they were using AI tools in their work. When they were asked, does your organization have any kind of AI policy, I think it was 13%. So what does that say about the sort of speed of adoption and travel more generally?
I would say that the attitude towards adoption of technology is very different if you compare America, many parts of Europe, versus the global majority in many places. And the reason is because, I will hypothesize, but I think that part of it is that technology has been a driver of, rapidly, improving economies, access to information. It has been a tool. You have seen how Gen Z has used technology to hold power to account and actually ask for change politically, right? I mean, so it is not universally viewed as this negative thing that is just destroying the world, right? And so there is, but the thing that gives me caution or pause is that the technology a lot of times does not work nearly as well. If we think it doesn't work well in English, it really doesn't work well in many, many other languages that are quote unquote low resource languages or not priority. And so, I think that on the one hand, we should be, like, I would argue that a lot of the innovation, a lot of the enthusiasm, a lot of the hustling of how you adopt these technologies in new and innovative ways do come from the global majority. And one reason why I'm so excited about the Journalism AI conference, which I would say is a marked difference than many other conferences that we see that are global by nature, is the representation that we're seeing from around the world. Because there's a lot of innovation that's happening, there's a lot of hustling, a lot of really cool things that are being done. Somehow, whether language, distance, air flight costs is a barrier, we're not seeing that in the global conversation. That's one thing that we are really working to trying to address. And I think I think I'm a little bit different in this, where I'm also looking at it from the regulatory lens, policy lens. a lot of the very interesting conversation around things like copyright, and legislation around this are happening in the global south. For example, in Brazil, the government is considering an AI bill that may include a copyright provision in it to protect copyright. The Indonesian Ministry of Law has issued something they call the Jakarta Protocol that they're bringing to the World IP Organization to talk about the protection of copyright, including journalism, right? So we're seeing in this broad, rapidly shifting geopolitical landscape, a multipolar world, if we want to talk about it that way, where we're seeing leadership in these markets. And these markets matter because they also matter to the global tech companies too. They're big markets. They're they make money already. That is, and also there's a lot of connection with markets in the Nordics and with the Netherlands because you have languages that are considered not top priority from global tech companies. We can do better. We can advocate for better. And the more we collaborate across borders, I think the more we'll see it.
That's fascinating. As I promised, I would like to go to our audience full of talented, wonderful people. I'd like to start right over there. Joanne.
Hi. Hello?
Yep.
Hello. Hello. My name's Joanna. I'm from Bloomberg. Every single one of you in this panel talked about the need for the industry to be collaborating and to agree on something. Given that we have such a global group of people here and so much representation, what is the one foundational thing each of you really wish we could all agree on for our journalism in AI future?
Journalists agree on one thing. Come on, Joanne.
I'm not sure that it's not an answer to your question, but just tapping into what you said about the tools not being good enough, I think as an industry, we can't lean on that as a fact anymore. I feel like we've said that for quite a few years now, that we can't trust these tools, we can't trust this technology. The tools are very, very good. They're getting very, very good, and we can trust them in many use cases. So that's one thing that I wish that we could move on from as an industry, this kind of complete skepticism as if AI forever will be completely kind of untrustworthy. I'm not saying that you said this, but I feel like as an industry, we're always somehow coming back to that, but at the end of the day, the only thing you can trust is human journalism. So I think that's one thing that we could move on from that.
I think the other thing that I would just say is that I have seen in this round of digital transformation so much more collaboration already than in previous rounds. I feel like in previous rounds of digital transformation, it was kind of, each woman and man out for themselves, and that everyone's kind of still slightly had the mentality of fighting like rats in a bag. And I'm so encouraged. So Reuters holds, we try and be as global as possible, but we hold it in different places for different sets of clients. But we hold a series of events called Future of News around the world. And it's so fascinating to see really harsh competitors, people at the opposite ends of political spectrums, people who are fighting for the same pot of funding, people who are fighting for the same audiences, and who are kind of like bare-toothed competitors out there, sitting around a table talking about what they're doing in AI, because we all know that we have to learn from each other. And I think that groups like this, groups that are convened by other groups, whether it's Reuters, whether it's WANIFRA, whether it's INMA, whoever it is, but actually I'm seeing so much more collaboration already. I think it's like night and day from when I started getting involved in all of this about 10 or so years ago. So I think, firstly, we are. I think, secondly, if we could collaborate on one thing, I think we're already seeing it. I think some of the work that EBU has been doing, that Ezra was talking about, in terms of actually standing up for what we already have, which is journalistic standards and kind of what's important and why. It's lovely to see Sanuta back there, because we were chatting away about like kind of what are the atoms of news that actually are the really important ones that must not be modified ever. Opinion can come and go, but what are the facts and how do we agree on that? So I think if I was going to choose one thing, I think it'd be around that. Like, what are the core things that we are going to stand up as an industry and say, no, that is immutable. Everything else can change, it can be reformatted, it can have opinions around it, it can be created a perspective around, but these are the things that actually mustn't be changed, and these are the kind of core things. Yeah. And I think that we've got more hope of finding common ground on that than we do on some of the other things.
And if I could add just one thing, I think we're still navigating this space quite blindly in terms of, I see every week a different report that says exactly the opposite of the report from the week before. So how can we manage something that we cannot measure very well, that we don't understand very well? How can we negotiate about compensations if we don't understand the traffic, the attribution, the copyright? And I really like the fact that Schibsted at one point this fall shared their traffic numbers from OpenAI. It was the first time a company did it so openly. I really would love the industry to do that more so that we collectively understand the picture. Irene?
Yeah, I think information sharing around and more transparency around deals and deal making with these big tech companies, the big failure of our industry vis-a-vis big tech last time around was that everyone got their own deal. They ran to get their own deal, which, by the way, were mostly political transactions, not even like product transactions. I think there are competition commissions and others that are also looking into this. And as the industry just asking for more data and more information out into the universe will help us to navigate this new world from a business and from a policy standpoint. And I think one other thing that I would just say about our industry is that we know what we do and we know why it's valuable. We need to understand how and why tech companies, how they view what we do. And I say this also from the experience of having worked at Google for a number of years. Because the thing is, like, we think what we do is so precious and so valuable and worth so much money, and why on earth don't people pay for it? But meanwhile, Google did a deal with Reddit for $60 million for their content, right? Like the deals that, like, so we have to really reckon with the fact that, like, there is a lack of understanding and a common, sense of the economic value of this, and I also need to acknowledge that and really put out there more firmly that journalism is hard, it's expensive, it takes, it's physically and also legally sometimes challenging. Like it's not like, we want, of course, knowledge to be free and open and everyone to access it, and we want the media to be in the AI system in a way that helps people understand the world better. But the math has to math. Someone has to pay for it, right? So we have to figure out collectively as a group how we start articulating that, and also if there are other angles and other business lines where we can insert ourselves into the business of information in AI systems.
Okay, we've got a couple.
I just want to mention, Charlie, we do have a live stream and we do have a question on the live stream. So perhaps we can take one question from the live stream.
Let's take the live stream and then we'll take this one here.
All right. I'm reading out the live stream to you, dear panelists. Jody Hopperton is asking, we're moving into a world of abundance. AI content has overtaken human content on the internet. How do the panelists view their specific USPs, the unique selling propositions, to consumers versus commodity content? Thank you very much.
Okay. The Jody, so that must be from California. And another one down front here. I'll get to you next time.
Up there, up.
Just here.
Thank you. To add to Irene, some people would say that Reddit has sold out. They'll get a one-time lump sum and then that's it. They have sold off their assets. So I'm wondering, are you preparing more and in your organizations for creating as much value as you can for human users and fortifying against AI, or are you trying to get as much value out of the future with agentic users, or is there a way to do both?
Okay. Pick any question you'd like to.
I'll take that last one, as you'd expect from Reuters. It's an excellent question, but I think we've got to think about how people are going to be getting information and what information is needed for. And so, for example, in our financial business, we've been producing news for machines for many, many years, because machines need to trade at very, very high speed. They don't actually want the human in the loop, that we just get in the way. Humans are slow. And so very much thinking kind of about agentically, what's the new market that we can be approaching? Are there new clients that actually need that good, trusted news flow? That, yes, from kind of referring to Jodie's question, there's so much information out there. If we're curating it down to kind of what people need, and it's able to be fed agent to agent, then that can be a really exciting potential future. I think that the way that people consume news now, just as much as we still have newspapers on the newsstands, but many, many fewer people read them. Home pages and on the websites, they'll probably still exist, but how many people will still use them? Is that really still the way that people are going to get it? Or are people going to have their own agents which are going to try and find out the information that they need for their lives, for their work, for their purposes, for their corporations' purposes? There's such a plethora of potential uses for information. And I think, so one of the things that we're thinking about very much is that we've always had kind of news as data, but what are the opportunities now? What are the other bits of our news gathering that we can make available? How can we expand that trusted, verified, true corpus of information that the agents can feed off? But because against the AI abundance part of it, that has been verified, that is publishable even if it's not necessarily a story. Because I think that's one of the things that we find as well in the newsroom, and I'm sure that anyone who's a journalist in this room knows, you have pages and pages and pages of notes that you condense into a 500-word story. And what happens to all that other stuff? It's all verified, it's all true, but we haven't been able to use it. And I think that now with agents, whether they're agents for our own journalists to use across their notes, agents for our clients to use across what we've verified, is a really exciting future.
And I think it's so important what you mentioned with people having their own agents, because I feel in your question, you're kind of framing agents as if we're optimizing for non-humans, but behind that agent is a human looking for information. That's why we hired the agent, set the agent out to find that information for us. So really optimizing for a human visiting our news destination or optimizing for an agent hired by a human who needs information is the same thing. It'll require different design choices, but fundamentally it's about making sure that people get information in the way that they want and need it.
And maybe adding to that, from a public broadcasting perspective, I do believe in that personalized approach, but I also think there are societal needs. And sometimes you have to bridge perspectives and you have to bridge the personal with the societal. And I think there's still a role, having that local relevance and connecting that to a higher societal narrative. Irene?
Yeah, I think that the reality is that more and more things that we consider news will be commoditized. I remember, what was it, maybe 10 years ago, I was in a meeting and a publisher was saying, why does Google publish cricket scores now? And why do they publish like voting data? That like we used to get so many hits off that. Election night was huge for us. Or, journalists who were like, I used to rewrite, company news press releases. And now you don't need to do that because agents do it. The more and more of this. So this goes to the question I think that was online about USP, right? Which is, what exactly do you need a human to do? I think about this often in terms of like the kind of the world when big companies talk about agents. They're like, someday you can talk to your agent and say, I want a restaurant that serves tapas, but is also gluten-free and also is, can give me a high chair for my 3-year-old, but won't be too noisy for, the blah, blah, blah. And it will come back and tell me, yes, this is your restaurant. And I'm thinking to myself, there is nowhere online that has 10 of those data points that you need to be able to get to that agent, right? And so that to me is the analogy of where I think news can have an opportunity, because the easier it is to use machines to process and hold data and information accountable, the more governments, corporates, and everyone else in power are going to just take things offline, right? So that is the opportunity. At a local level, if we think about agents, the opportunity is not news in a silo, but local news plus, you know, public works data, plus the weather, plus, you know, what's going to happen. That is where you're going to have an agent that really serves users well. This is the opportunity, and it doesn't have to be a big tech company that's going to build that. It's probably going to be a small startup that's myopically focused on one small user base, and then they build it and it works. Then they can sell that tech and franchise it with others who have similar data sets. That is the opportunity.
One last question. We've got one last dynamite killer question that will summon the whole conference and rock everyone's boat. Yes. Yeah, he looks like he's got one.
Matthew Linares, Open Democracy. There's an analysis that says the reason for many of the problems we've experienced in journalism and society in recent times is due to the closed proprietary nature of many of the platforms that manage our ecosystems. As we look to building and investing in the future of platforms, what do you think about open protocols and platforms? And I think, you know, the Twitter X against Blue Sky Mastodon example is perhaps indicative.
Sure. I mean, diversification, interoperability. If you have more options and you level the playing field so that people can develop off of it, there's power there. I'm very encouraged by that somehow in this new movement we are seeing more of that. There will be a lot of folks who are entrenched and powerful who will say, well, scale is still the big things. You need all the money. You need all the whatever. You don't need to build the next foundation model to leverage this tech to build something that really works for people, as Agnes said. And if I sounded like I was saying that none of the tech works and everyone should just go back to writing on pen and paper, that's not what I meant. But I think that the point is that it can be better, and it will be built better when people are building for their communities. And so, you know, kind of open source, more collaboration, sharing, and also investment in this. And to me, you know, focusing on what is this middle layer, what from those who can produce content to the endpoint, whether it's a human or machine. What are all the intermediaries that are going to do that? You know, control that flow. If we can build on that and have a stake in it, there's potential.
I think we'll leave the last word with Irene there. That's brilliant. I just want to say thank you very much to all four of you. It's always a pleasure to be in your company. I've learned so much. You've brought such fantastic insights, and also a sense that I think this next year is going to be moving forward, and we've got so much to do, and you've been really inspiring. So thank you very, very much. Thank you all as well for being here.